Welcome to Capitol Hill, where the budget, the questions of debt, deficits and surpluses again dominated the debate. There'll be another in the formal set pieces of Budget Week as Tony Abbott, the opposition leader, delivers his budget in reply tonight. But there's been much discussion during the day about the budget, and to continue it, we've been joined in the studio by Liberal MP Kelly O'Dwyer and Labor MP Nick Champion. Welcome to you both.
Good afternoon.
Nice to be with you, Linda.
But first, in Budget Week, even the best laid plans can go astray, as the Treasurer Wayne Swan found out this morning.
When did Labor last deliver a surplus budget?
Well, we'd have to go back to the 1980s, I should think. But Labor wasn't in power when that great growth spurt came through in the late 80s and in the late 90s, in the early 2000s.
You can't nominate a date.
I can't nominate a date.
Tony Abbott delivers his budget in reply tonight. He says he'll offer a clear alternative.
Well, what we'll need to see tonight is the... Sorry.
Whoops. We've just had a glass breakage here.
Oh, Kieran, I'm not going to play this silly game. Distraction, distraction, distraction. Wayne Swan did smash a glass this morning. That's less important than Tony Abbott smashing the budget surplus tonight.
Nick Champion, glass breakage aside, given Wayne Swan had been asked about the question of the surplus in the Parliament, should he have known the answer?
Well, look, I think it's an important historical fact that Labor ran the first budget surplus at that time since the 1960s. So if we want to talk about history, if we want to talk about surpluses and deficits, for instance, John Howard never ran a surplus when he was Treasurer. But that's all history, and we want to talk about the future. We want to talk about getting the budget back into surplus. We want to talk about getting people back into jobs. We want to talk about getting people back into training and spreading the opportunities that are available under the mining boom more fairly and more generously to all Australians.
Kelly O'Dwyer, Joe Hockey referred to the incident in the Parliament, questioning the Prime Minister over whether Australia deserved a Treasurer with a steady hand who didn't fumble the figures. Was that really fair, given that glasses can break?
Well, look, clearly Wayne Swan is a man who is under pressure. You only need to look at that footage that you just brought up before to know that. Wayne Swan, of course, was asked a question about when Labor last delivered a surplus. Now, that's actually a pretty basic question, and it's a pretty easy answer to give. The problem here was, though, that he couldn't give it, and he couldn't give it even with 24 hours notice. He also couldn't give it by referring to his very own budget papers, which he had right in front of him. So it really, I suppose, goes to a question of... Well, I'll let you have a go, Nick. It goes to a question of competence. But it's no wonder that Wayne Swan himself is quite panicked, and it's no wonder he broke a glass in all of that. But that's not the only thing that Wayne Swan, of course, has been breaking. He's been breaking records. He's been breaking records on debt and deficit. We've got a $107 billion net debt now. Now, that's at historic highs. That's going to have a $7.5 billion interest bill. Now, that interest bill is going to have to be paid by the Australian people. So Wayne Swan, of course, really needs to be accountable. He needs to be accountable for his figures. And it's interesting, you want to talk about sort of historical figures. Well, if you add together all of Labor's cumulative deficits over their last sort of 8 budgets, it's $200 billion. $200 billion.
We'll just let Nick respond and then move on.
Look, you want to pretend that the global financial crisis didn't happen, and you want to pretend that the budget surplus for 89, which is what you're referring, was in this year's budget papers. So that's what you just said, and this is just typical of the chicanery of the opposition. It is just typical. All these distractions, a glass breaks,
we had the Asian financial crisis,
a glass
the global
breaks.
tech
Just take a breath. A glass breaks, and somehow that's symbolic of something, and it's just ridiculous. It's the most juvenile type of politics you can play.
The critical point
it's the most juvenile type of politics.
The critical point is the fact that he can't answer the question.
And if you want to talk about figures, the pressure's on the opposition leader tonight to actually come up with his own. And we won't see any figures. What we'll see is more wild rhetoric, more stunts, more sort of,
if we can go first to the detail of the government's budget, the government, the treasurer, the families.
12 months to put together, by the way.
The treasurer and the families minister began a bit of a fight back on the opposition's attack on the family tax benefit. The treasurer also began a bit of a fight back on the opposition's criticism of the extension of the set-top box for pensioners program. Is that the sort of thing that Labor backbenchers want to see the government doing?
Well, what we want to do is get out there and sell the budget, and there are lots of good things in the budget. And for my electorate, there's income management in the city of Playford, and that's a very important extension of welfare reform and a very important thing for my local area. So we're going to be out there selling the fact that we're putting the budget back into surplus after a period of after a period of international financial crisis. No, well,
it's a promise.
Well, you know very well there's been an international financial crisis. You know very well that our debt, by comparison to just about every other country, is manageable and serviceable and low.
All right, well, let's talk about paying it back. Can we talk about paying it back?
We'll just let
and what we want to do is go out there and talk about skills, talk about training, talk about jobs. The Liberal Party never talks about jobs because we've got an unemployment rate of 4.9%, while Canada, which also has a resource-rich economy, has an unemployment rate of 7.8%. Now, where would you rather be? Where would you rather be than Australia?
Kelly, is the important
be in any other part of the world?
Kelly, is the important thing about debt your capacity to pay it?
Well, that's exactly right. The capacity to pay debt back as well. And we have to look at the record of the Labor government. Now, they talk a lot about paying it back. They talk a lot about getting into surplus. It's a big promise. And yet, on Tuesday night, the government tried to sneak in a bill to raise the borrowing limit that is currently in place, $200 billion. They wanted to increase it to $250 billion. At the same time, you're talking about reducing government net debt. You're not doing anything about it. What you're sneakily trying to do is actually put more on the nation's credit card. Now, I mean, goodness, you wonder why you've got a credibility problem?
Just think about what you just said. We tried to sneak a bill into Parliament. I mean, that's just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. What, you weren't going to notice? The independents weren't going to notice? The ABC wasn't going to notice?
Well, it's not something you put a press release out on, by the way. It's not something that you were talking about.
Chicanery. It's just chicanery.
And it's all these tricks. You're trying to be dishonest with the Australian people.
All these tricks, no facts and figures, and all we will get from Tony Abbott, who is all mouth and trousers, is just wild rhetoric, wild ranting, and no facts and figures. And that's, like the Australian people, I can understand they see glimpses of Tony Abbott on going off, all full on, and they must think, I wonder what's going on there. But it's not the quality you want in a Prime Minister, just someone who will just spout rhetoric and not come up with facts and figures.
Honestly.
No facts and figures.
Kelly O'Dwyer, is the important thing that Tony Abbott has to do say what the opposition will support in the government's budget?
I'll tell you exactly what Tony Abbott is going to do tonight, because it is really critical. A budget in reply speech is one of those critical speeches.
It's a rare moment.
It's a critical speech which will enable the Australian people to see an alternate vision for this country, how we can hold the government to account for the promises that they have made, which is really critically important because, let's face it, the government have made a number of promises where we can hold them to account for their record, for their own figures, for the figures that they have put together over a period of 12 months in their budget papers, and it will demonstrate to the Australian people at the same time that our priorities are going to be very different. An alternate Abbott government will have very different priorities to this government. We will not stand for waste and mismanagement. We will be fiscally responsible. We will pay back debt.
What cuts will you make? What savings will you oppose?
We've actually got a record on this. We paid back $96 billion of your debt last time.
Talk about now.
Why would you talk about history? Why would you stand on your record? Let's talk about the never.
If I can just insert a quick question into this. Nick Champion, why should the opposition have to detail spending and saving when we're potentially 2.5 years out from an election? Isn't a broad overview what you expect from an opposition leader at this point in the electoral cycle?
Well, Lyndall, every time the opposition has outlined their spending, it's been a disaster for them. They tried to do it. They tried to do it in the run-up to the election, and they dodged their own charter, the charter that Peter Costello put in, your predecessor put in. They dodged it. Dodged putting in their figures. The second time they tried it was last. The second time they tried it was during the flood levy, and that was also a disaster. That was also a disaster because what they went out and did is propose cutting a very important Howard government program for schools in Indonesia, preventing the radicalisation of Indonesia.
If I can flip that question around, potentially we're less than 2 years out from an election where there could be a by-election at any stage and the government could change sides. Under those circumstances, does it then become a bit more of an issue for the people to see what exactly the opposition will be offering?
Well, I've never seen an opposition, and you didn't do it, I've never seen an opposition deliver a budget from opposition. Now, I know Julia Gillard is very shrilly saying that this is something that Tony Abbott needs to do, and that's because, you know, she can't rely on Wayne Swan to deliver a real budget. She'd like Tony Abbott to do it for her. Now, I can understand why she would like that to happen, because her government lacks leadership, it lacks direction, and it is absolutely bereft with waste and mismanagement. We did outline before the last federal election $50 billion worth of savings. We stand by those figures.
But you know, we have demonstrated
we've demonstrated that we have the capacity through our historical record, which, by the way, is a lot better than yours. We're happy to stand on our record. We don't just make promises, we deliver.
Do you want to abide by your predecessor's charter? Will you abide by your predecessor's charter?
You know,
that's the only real important question here.
I find it
your
extraordinary.
predecessor putting a charter.
You can't even keep
we abided by it in opposition.
If you'll let me actually respond, you can't even keep a promise made before the election 6 months in. You know, Julia Gillard promised not to introduce a carbon tax. She can't even hold that promise for 6 months.
That's nonsense. We've had 2 elections on the price of carbon.
I find your sort of moral high-handedness on this really pretty extraordinary, Nick.
Nick Champion, how will you be seeing the opposition leader's budget in reply? Because if he has a broad vision, isn't that enough?
Well, look, what we'll see, we won't see a broad vision for the Australian people. What we'll see is negative rhetoric, negativity, and more negativity. I mean, that's all we'll really see. And then there'll be a couple of bells and whistles at the bottom, changing a few minor things. But it will mostly be about, you know, and you can hear this in Kelly's rhetoric, it's mostly about how terrible the government is, blah, 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 blah. Oh, and by the way, here's a few little things. They don't want to be an alternative government. They just want to be an aggressive opposition.
Quickly from you, Kelly, how would you like people to judge the opposition leader's address tonight?
Well, I think that they should judge it based on what they hear. You know, unlike Nick, you know, the Australian people will be listening, and they'll be listening because they know that Australia needs a really strong, good government, a government that understands it needs to be economically responsible. We certainly know that the poor Australian people have to rein in their own budget. That's something we need to do as a government as well.
Kelly O'Dwyer, Nick Champion, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Nick.
And thank you very much for joining Capitol Hill today.